everyone, my name is Taylor Smith, aka the Career Coach, and today I'm talking about resume formatting tips and tricks. So whether you're creating your very first resume or maybe it's been a while but you just feel like everything is starting to run together and it's just not as organized and sleek and clean as you would like it to be. Either way, this video is dedicated to you, so keep on watching. Until then, again, I am a career coach and I help college students and professionals get noticed by recruiters, stand out as a top candidate, and get offers for paid internships and full-time opportunities. If any of that resonates with you, then you're in the correct place, so let's go ahead and get started with our video. Alrighty, so first and foremost is your resume template. So you want to make sure that you're selecting something that's pretty simple and neutral. You don't need any fancy colors, you don't need a hot pink, green, blue, all of that. You want to mostly stick to different blacks, grays, and maybe you can add a little bit of color, but make sure it's very subtle hint of color. It's nothing super bright or poppy. In addition to that, you want to focus on more of the content and the words you have to say within your resume. These are the things that are truly going to make you stand out and make you memorable, not necessarily how your resume looks. So check out this video here from last week if you want to learn more about resume smart description, so you can focus more about the content within your resume and not just all the nice pretty things that are nice haves, because having your resume be a little bit more boring and a little bit more traditional is going to have you go a lot further than having something that's super flashy, super pretty, that's kind of convoluted and makes it really hard for the recruiter to really understand what it is that you have on your resume and really organize and pinpoint what are the main important things, because the average recruiter only looks at your resume for about 5 to 6 seconds at initial glance. And if it's too confusing, if it's too busy and they're not able to clearly pinpoint the information that they need, that's the most critical, then they're not going to waste time on it, no matter how pretty, how colorful it is, because honestly, some of these templates, some of these designs can be a little bit distracting and make your recruiter focus on the wrong things rather than the most important content you have on your resume. So you can also watch this video here for 10 ways on how to make you stand out to recruiters, so that way you're focused more on these things rather than trying to have this poppy resume template with these different colors, different bar graphs, and other things that I've heard of that are actually a little bit more distracting to your recruiter than helping you in a good way. So as far as font styles go, you want to make sure that you're picking something that is very simple and legible to read. So a lot of these are going to be like your sans serif styles. This is like a Arial, Helvetica, Vernanda, Georgia, different ones like this. You could also use like a Times New Roman, Calibri, Cambria, but basically something that's just very simple and overall legible for the recruiter to read. Alrighty, so font sizes. So for the name, of course, this is usually the biggest and boldest on your resume. I like to use something between a size 20 to 40, depending on the different style of font that you use and all the information you have on your resume as well. As far as the different sections, I like this to be somewhere between like a size 14 to 16, again, depending on the style and how much information you have on there. If you want to learn more about different resume sections you can include, which is like your objective, education, professional experience, etc., make sure you check out this video here. As far as your subsections or your subheaders, this is more so like listing out the different experiences or the different companies listed under each professional experience. For example, this is going to be like a size 12 to 14. And then as far as the different body text or like your bullet point descriptions, this could be somewhere between like a size 10 to 12. You don't want this to be too small, but again, this is going to depend on how much content you have on your actual resume and also dependent on the different style fonts you use, because some styles, if you get down to like size 10, it's just a little too small and that's not a good size for you to use, especially if you're going to print out your resume to go to some kind of career fair or some kind of in-person interview. So you want to make sure you're being mindful of these things. Italics, bold, and underlining. So here you want to remember that less is more. You don't want to do too much on your resume where it becomes a convoluted mess and no one can really understand or break up what you have on your resume. So that's why it's important to follow some consistency throughout your resume with the bold, italics, and underline, so it's very clear and easy to break up the different information you have on your resume. So as far as bolding, I usually like to only bold the name, some of the section headers, and then also like important information like the GPA. That should specifically be bolded on your resume. As far as italics go, so usually I like to italicize the position or the company title, but not both. So what my preference is typically I like to bold the company name, and then underneath I'll put the position title in italics. So for example, I work with Baker Hughes, I would bold that, and my current position is lead sourcing specialist. I would put that in italics. Or you could flip-flop it, so you italicize the company name and then you maybe bold the position that you're currently in. Whichever one you prefer to do, I just recommend not doing both because it gets a little confusing when you have both like that. And then as far as underlining, me personally, I only really like to underline the different section headers that I have on my resume, so it's very clear and it breaks up the resume very neatly. But otherwise, I don't really think you should have much underlining on your resume unless you have a line at the very beginning that's underneath your name. Other than that, I think you should just keep it really simple at this, and so that you have very minimal bold, underlining, and italics. Up next, we have margins. So depending on if you're trying to create more space or maybe you need to take up a little bit more space, you can modify your margins within your resume to help you out. So let's say that you just have a lot of information, you're trying to squeeze in maybe a couple more sections, or you're trying to have more longer and detailed bullet point descriptions, then you can actually decrease your margins. So you can actually expand it so that you have more space on your resume for all of this information. My advice though is just to not go lower than 0.25 inches so that you are still having a clean resume and you have that little bit of white space around the edge. Otherwise, it just looks a little bit weird and just isn't the most clean and sleek resume. And then also, if you were to print something out, some of that may get lost without along the print border. So that's why you don't want to go shorter than a quarter of an inch. If you don't have a lot of experience and you're trying to make sure that you fill up your resume as much as possible, you can actually increase your margins so that way you're reducing the amount of space a little bit. Just make sure that you don't go above 1 inch or 1.25 inches max. So this is also to make your margins and everything just not look too funky and weird. You want to have a clean and sleek resume at the end of the day, and you don't want it to look like you're manipulating it because you just don't have that much experience. If you want to be able to add more things to your resume in order to make yourself stand out, you can check out this resume here where I talk about 10 ways you can actually start building your resume by doing things right now to get active, or things that you may have already done in the past that you can look to possibly incorporate into your resume to really make you stand out, even if you may not have relevant experience, but there may be other things that you've already done that you can highlight on your resume as well. In addition to that, if you're somebody that just has way too much information and you're trying to make sure you talk about the most pertinent information and you need to consolidate your resume down to 1 page, you can check out this video where I talk about how to consolidate your resume down to 1 page so that you're talking about the most important and relevant information. Alrighty, so as far as your organization and flow on your resume, you want to make sure that you organize your different sections on your resume in order of relevancy. So after your name and after your objective, which is actually an optional section you can include on your resume, you want to make sure that you have the most relevant information that follows. So for example, if you're currently a college student or maybe a recent graduate, then you can keep your education section up front underneath the objective so that you're focused on what did you actually major in, or what did you recently receive your degree in, especially if you're looking to go into a field that's related to that. But however, if it's been a while since you graduated and you have more relevant experience to what you're currently doing or what you want to do in the future, and maybe your education just isn't really aligned to that anymore, then you can put this section closer to the bottom of your resume. And then everything else follows is again based off of the relevancy. So if you have any relevant work experience, you can go ahead and list that next. Relevant projects, any leadership experience, certifications and trainings, and just keep going on with the rest of your different experiences within your resume. Up next, we have consistency. So you want to make sure that you're remaining consistent throughout your resume, especially related to your sections as well as your dates. So as far as your sections, like we kind of mentioned before, if you're going to bold and underline this section here at the top, make sure you're doing the same thing throughout the rest of your resume so that you're remaining consistent. Same thing with your date. So as far as your durations, you have to make sure that you're listing those on your resume for every experience that you have. So if up top I have January 2022 to April 2022, I want to make sure I keep that consistency throughout my resume. So I shouldn't have at another part on my resume where I only have Aug 2022 to Nov 2022, because that's inconsistent. If I'm going to abbreviate down here, I need to abbreviate up here. If I'm going to spell it out all the way up here, I need to spell it out all the way down here. Same thing if you're going to do 08 2022 to 12 2022, you need it to be consistent throughout. So whatever date format you decide to do, make sure that you're remaining consistent throughout the rest of your resume. Same thing as far as your different locations. If you're going to add the city and state for one position up here, make sure that you add the city and state throughout the rest of your descriptions and you're following the same consistency. If you're going to abbreviate the state for Texas, for example, and just do TX, that's fine, but making sure that if you do that again later and it's for Alabama, you're doing AL and you're not just spelling out Alabama. So making sure that you have consistency throughout your resume. Alignment on your resume is also important. So for example, all your header text, all of your bullet point descriptions, this is a little bit easier to make sure that you have proper alignment, because whenever you hit enter, it's going to make sure that it's perfectly aligned. However, if you have anything that's on the right side of your page, for example, I like to do my dates on the same line as the subheader text. So for example, if I work with Baker Hughes, I'm going to say the duration I worked at Baker Hughes from this date to this date. That's usually on the same line. So in order to make sure that I have the right alignment for all my dates at the end of the page, the easiest thing that I found is to basically tab it out all the way to the end, and when the text goes down to the next line, I backspace it and I just hit the space bar all the way until it meets the end of the page and it flushes. And if it skips to the next line, then I backspace it one and I know that it's perfectly at the end of the page. There's probably an easier way to do that with the alignment tools at the top with the different ruler and grid lines. I just don't have the time or the patience for that, because sometimes it doesn't work out for me the way that I want. So this has been the easiest trick that I do to make sure that everything stays aligned for me on my resume. Alrighty, so spacing throughout your resume is critical because this is what makes it appealing to the eye. Sometimes in person, your recruiter may also write notes on your resume, so having that little bit of white space is also going to be a key thing here so that there's actual room for them to write notes. But overall, it's just so that it's more visually appealing, because if you have all the words crammed together and there's not a lot of space in between, it just makes it really hard for your brain to focus and decide where to start or where to skip to next throughout your resume. So that's why this is very critical. But as far as spacing in between different sections within my resume, I like to do sizes between size font 6 and 11 depending on the different style and fonts that you use. And this is basically between like your professional section before you skip to like your leadership section on your resume. If it's between different subsections within the same section, so let's say for example in my professional experience section, I may have that I worked at Baker Hughes, and I may have that I also worked with GE in the past as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of space in between there, about a size 3 to 7, so that I have a little room there. And then also sometimes I like to add a little bit of space in between the section header and then also the subsection header. So this is like the professional experience compared to Baker Hughes. And I might have something between like a font size 1 and 3 so that there's a little bit of separation there and you can kind of break up the spaces on the resume. Links and barcodes. So if you may come from a tech background, maybe like computer engineering, computer science, IT, cybersecurity, or maybe even an artistic background, like you're an art teacher or some kind of artist, you may want to include some kind of portfolio on your resume so that people can access this. So now that we live in this tech age where everything is pretty simple and easy, you can actually create and generate a free barcode online, and you can actually attach this possibly to the corner of your resume, whether at the top or at the bottom. And if you don't want to do that, instead you can use like tiny URL to get like a really short URL code. You can put that underneath your resume, or if it's a very simple and basic name, like it's your own domain, like for example my website is taylorosmith.com. That's pretty simple. I might have that on my resume underneath my name, on there, and that way they can actually type in that URL, or if they're online they can probably even click it and go to that page automatically. Or with the simple QR scanner code, they can actually use their phone, open up the camera, and they can usually open that and see what your portfolio there as well. But those are some options that you could do to add that to your resume. So if someone wants to look at your portfolio and the different things that you have to offer, they have that reference immediately. If you want to learn more about the different portfolios and things that you can add to your resume, specifically as some kind of computer engineer, computer scientist, IT, or cybersecurity, you guys are in luck, because next week I'm posting a video on my channel where I'm going to discuss this and what to include in your portfolio. So make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss next week's video. List or table. So there's certain sections of your resume where you may feel like you want to include some kind of list and you want to embed that in a table, or the template you have actually has some kind of table set up. So my preference is to always remove tables from your resume, because this can be a formatting nightmare when trying to add everything on your resume, and it just creates a lot of pains and headaches that you don't actually need to go through. Or sometimes it can create some errors whenever you may be going through some automated scanning system that's reading your resume, and it may not pick up on some of the information in the table. So it's best to just go ahead and remove it and format it in your own way. So as far as the list, like maybe your technical skills section, I say that you can just list this out simply separate it by commas. So maybe you have experience with NX Design, AutoCAD, Aspen HYSYS, Microsoft Suite, etc. You can just put commas in between all of them and list them out on your resume. However, if you maybe have like your relevant project section on your resume, you may have several listed on there, and you want to make sure that it's very clean and separated. What I like to do is this alignment tool, like we kind of mentioned before, and also just align it by tabbing. So I might write one class here, I might write like my C++ class, and then I might put Introduction to Engineering. So I'm just going to put a tab in between there, maybe a couple tabs, and write the rest of my classes. Maybe I'll have about 3 different courses within one line, or maybe 4 depending on how short or long each one is, and kind of separate that on my resume like that. What else? That's the main thing as far as lists. I think that makes it a lot more simpler and easier to digest than having the tables, which again can be a formatting nightmare. So it's better to just go ahead and list it out on your resume, and it's pretty simple and it's pretty clean. Next, I want to talk about how to save your file. So you want to make sure you're saving this as your first name, last name, resume. And this is more so as a courtesy. So if you're submitting your resume online for some kind of application, or you're emailing it to someone, the recruiter usually has to house all of these different resumes that they have, whether in some kind of large folder, database, whatever. And with that said, they need to save all of these files. And so if they see one in the bunch that says resume 2022, that doesn't really tell them whose resume that is. Now they have to open it up and change the name of the file. In some cases they're going to do that, but it's a nuance. In some cases they may say forget that, and they may just throw your resume away. You just never know. So that's why it's best for you to go ahead and name it as your first name, last name, resume. If you have several versions on your resume, like I do sometimes, then you can add some more information after the fact. So you can have something that says like engineering resume fall 2022, or you could specify it as retail resume 2022 and just specify with the different years or the different time period throughout the year, just in case you update your resume about every semester or every quarter, what have you. So that's a little tip that I do. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're always saving your resume as a PDF file, whether you're saving it as that or you're printing it as a PDF. So that way when you apply online, you're always attaching it as a PDF copy, or if you're emailing it out to a recruiter, you're using the PDF copy again. And the main reason for this is so that it doesn't mess with the integrity of your document. All that hard work you did with all of that formatting is still intact and nothing gets messed up. because, for example, if I open up Microsoft Word on my phone versus my computer, it's going to be all types of jacked up, and it's going to be very different than what it looks like on the computer. Also, if I may be more zoomed in on my Microsoft Word, but you weren't on your settings, then that may also mess up with the integrity of the formatting. Or if I don't have that specific text or font style on my computer, it's going to look very different. So that's why you want to make sure you always save it as a PDF copy, so that is never modified and adjusted. And then also, this prevents people from making any changes to your resume, maybe modifying it and adjusting it so that you have the latest and greatest version available. Alrighty, y'all, well, that's it for this video. I hope that you guys liked it and you learned something new. If you did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you want to learn more about resumes, professional development, or different career paths related to engineering and supply chain, make sure to check out the other videos on my channel. I will put my contact information as far as my social media, website, and all that in the description box below if you want to stay connected with me. But until then, you guys, best of luck to you, happy job hunting, and I will talk to y'all all really soon. Take care.